Hello and welcome back to the Wasteland, everybody. Welcome back to Fallout New Vegas, where today we're going to be taking a look at the shoulder-mounted machine gun from the Divide. This is one of the, I guess, kind of unique weapons from the Divide, although there is multiple of them. But it is still an interesting weapon that you can't find anywhere else outside of the Divide. It's also one of those weird weapons that actually doesn't have anything that you can fix it with, similar to like the hollow rifle. So if you do want to fix up the shoulder-mounted machine gun, you either need to find other shoulder-mounted machine guns, or you need to find somebody fixing this, which you could in the Divide pretty easily, or you need to find weapon repair kits in order to fix this. Luckily, you can go to the Divide really early on and potentially find one of these. Some of the marked men have them, so you probably have to fight one of the marked men, one of the named marked men that have these, in order to get one. But they can be a pretty decent weapon because they're a very interesting weapon in that they take the 10mm round, which not a whole lot of guns actually use that. It's this one, the submachine gun, which we talked about last time, and the 10mm pistol. So the shoulder-mounted machine gun requires 75 guns and 7 strength to wield. It is a really big gun. It kind of makes sense that it would have high strength requirements. It's got the same animations and very similar to like the missile launcher in terms of looks overall and how your person handles it. And just like the missile launcher, it doesn't really draw that fast, so kind of keep that in mind. This is usually you already have it out and you're trying to fight stuff. This one does 30 damage per shot, which is quite high. That's the highest out of any of the 10mm weapons in all of New Vegas, so that's pretty cool. This one does 210 damage per second, which gives it pretty high damage per second. Not as high as like the 10mm submachine guns, at least sleepy time, but more than something like the 10mm pistol, and it's still pretty competent towards other big weapons. This one does 20 crit damage, weirdly enough. It actually does less crit damage than it has base damage, but even weirder than that, it actually doesn't have a crit modifier, which is bizarre, at least on the wiki. I think this one does actually have a crit modifier on it, and you can still hit crits. I don't know what the exact amount is. I'm assuming it's 0 point something, and the wiki is just off by saying it's 0 times, because I have seen crits popping up when I've been shooting this thing. So it can't just be 0. It's not like some of the explosive weapons that actually don't do any damage on this. It seems to do extra damage. I'm just not exactly sure what the exact amount is. This costs 30 action points to use in VATS, making it not so bad for a VATS weapon, weirdly enough. Usually the big weapons are not great for VATS because they cost a lot, but this one's actually okay in VATS. This one has 0.9 spread, so it's actually fairly accurate for a full auto weapon. That's more accurate than most of the submachine guns and some of the like full auto weapons. This holds a 60 round magazine in it by default, although that can be increased with one of its mods, increasing its magazine even further, but 60 rounds is still pretty good. This weighs 17 weight, which is kind of an odd weight, but that can be affected by the heavyweight perk, so you could cut this in half, which would be pretty useful. You can get it down to 8.5 weight. Wouldn't be as heavy then. And this one has 800 item health, which is fantastic because that means it's not going to break super fast. And we've already explained why breaking could be a problem, because you have to either find more of these, or you have to find somebody that can fix this, or you have to fix it with weapon repair kits. Even if you have jury rigging, you can't fix this with other large weapons like miniguns for some odd reason. But 800 health does go quite a ways, especially since this isn't the fastest shooting full auto weapon in the game. It's still fairly fast shooting, it's just not like minigun rate of fire or anything like that. For the general pros of the shoulder-mounted machine gun, this one does do pretty good damage per second, and it's pretty good so long as you're not fighting heavily armored enemies. Even if you are fighting heavily armored enemies, so long as you're using the standard 10mm rounds, you can still do at least a decent amount of damage per second to them. But then with its unique rounds, not so much, because that just has hollow points and the jacketed hollow points. So heavily armored enemies can tank through a decent amount of this. But light and medium armored enemies, you can still beat up pretty easily with this. It also has very common ammo, which is fantastic. 10mm is not super hard to get. You can buy quite a lot of it from vendors, and basically every vendor sells some amount of 10mm, so that's fantastic. It's not too hard to stock up on. The major con to this weapon, though, is that it is just heavy. It's a heavy weapon, and you do have to go out of your way to get it from the Divide, and we've already talked about the repair issues as well. So it's got a couple of problems with it, but nothing that's particularly terrible about the weapon. I go back and forth on this weapon actually quite a lot, because sometimes I use it and it feels fantastic, and other times I use it and I feel like I'm not hitting anything, and I don't know if that's actually a bug that's in the game, where sometimes it might just be like eating my rounds and I'm just not seeing them. But other times I can just mow through just about anything with the shoulder-mounted machine gun, so it kind of goes back and forth for me. There are no like major perks that actually help with the shoulder-mounted machine gun. There are some ones that do help with just it being a heavy weapon in general. Pack rat can be useful just because then it will cut down on the overall weight of the ammo. 10mm is not the most heavy ammo in the game though, so that's not always a necessity, but it is just a nice quality of life thing. And then we've talked about heavyweight, which can cut its weight in half, so you go down to 8.5 weight, which is more manageable, so that's pretty nice. For an overall rating for the shoulder-mounted machine gun, I think I would put it up into B tier. I think it's pretty decent at just about everything, so long as you're not fighting heavily armored enemies, in which case I would want something like the minigun over this, since I can just cut through the armor then, especially if you have armor piercing rounds in it. Now, there's a modded version of this, because you can put 3 mods onto this weapon. You do need to buy all 3 of these in the Divide, and they are going to be very expensive. The Divide's upgrades are incredibly expensive. Even with maxed out barter, they're still usually like 12 to 13,000 a piece for both this weapon and like the red glare. So if you want both, you're spending like 70,000, 80,000 caps on it minimum if you want them, which you may already have by the time you're actually getting to the Divide, because you can earn a lot of money in New Vegas, especially if you wanted to just like snag a bunch of the gold bars from Sierra Madre and then just bring them over, because that will basically pay for everything. Anyway, the 3 upgrades that you can get are a mechanical upgrade. This one increases your accuracy, so you go from 0.9 spread to 0.7 spread. That's even better. That actually makes it a pretty accurate full auto weapon. It's as accurate as the 44 Magnum then, funny enough. So it's not terrible at range. It can actually hit things at somewhat long range too. You have a recoil compensator, which that's actually the spread. Sorry, the mechanical upgrade is increasing the item's health. I got those two mixed up. Increasing the item's health goes up by 25%, so you go from 800 health all the way up to 1,000 health. That's pretty good too. Full auto weapons love extra item health, that way you're not breaking them as fast, especially this weapon. And then you can also have an extended mag on this, which increases the overall magazine size from 60 to 75. It's not a massive upgrade in terms of mag size, and you probably won't notice that much compared to the other 2 options, but it's still a nice bonus to the weapon. And with all these on it, I would honestly just bump the shoulder-mounted machine gun up another tier, up into like A tier. I think it's a solid enough weapon, even though it can struggle against heavily armored enemies. As long as you're not using it against those, then you at least have something to throw your 10mm at, which can be pretty good. And sometimes this weapon can really shine, like I said. Other times it gets kind of wonky for me. I don't know. Tell me your thoughts on the shoulder-mounted machine gun in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. How do you guys feel about this? Do you use it? I know some people really like it, and I know some people really hate it or just don't use it in general. But my experience has always been kind of mixed with this weapon. And it can be good, and sometimes it can just be kind of okay. So I'd love to hear your guys' comments on it. Thank you guys so very much for watching this. Hope that you guys enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.